And we're live. Phil Tarrant, Tom Panos, Real Estate Exposed, simultaneously cast across real estate business and smart property investment. Tom Panos out of the office in sunny Byron Bay for an express edition of Real Estate Exposed. Tom, how are you going?
I'm very well. And it's been it's glorious weather here in the northern rivers of New South Wales. And I'm actually flying back this afternoon in around 2 hours. But it's really interesting, Phil. I've been following the market here and looking at what's been going on. And there's definitely, it hasn't had the price the price challenges that we've had in a lot of the marketplaces across Australia, being in the metro cities, hasn't been felt that much here. I mean, there's been, even as I speak to you, I look across at a property that's sold on a small block of 450 square meters here in Byron Bay, half a block actually behind a house. So just picture a block of land cut behind a house. I'm staring at it across in the distance. It sold for $6 million. It's really interesting because it's becoming very clear. There's a price point where buyers are totally unaffected with everything that's going on. It's like they maybe they're not interest rate sensitive people, right? Or maybe that they've got enough money that a small interest rate rise is not a huge impact. And on the other hand, Phil, I'm hearing other parts of Sydney, Melbourne, even Brisbane now, 10 and 15% declines are common.
Yeah, we spoke about that last week, and I think we both had formed the opinion, at least in Sydney and Melbourne, that prices are already back 10%. The data just hasn't shown it yet, and I think you'll continue to see that moving forward. Is a good point. Greeting, gents. What's that? Fixed rates went up yesterday for every across Westpac and stuff. No fixed interest rates this week. I have to look at that. Yeah, I saw two of the banks had put up their fixed rates only today. But Tom, here's something, mate. It's a bit of a scenario, and it pretty much encapsulates the market as it sits right now, and it has a number of different stakeholders. When you look at the real estate sector now, you've got a buyer, you've got a seller, you've got a real estate agent, you've got a property manager, you've got sometimes a property investor, and you also have buyer's agents. So there's many layers within the property sector now, Tom. Now, we got some really good feedback on Smart Property Investment. For those of you not familiar with it, smartpropertyinvestment.com.au, where I host a podcast. And this particular podcast that we're talking about right now, Tom, is going to be going on there because it's highly relevant. And I want your sense of it because I think you'll be able to articulate this better than anyone. We got this comment coming in from a reader who pretty much went, why would you use a buyer's agent? Buyer's agents overpay for property. And his point was he was negotiating for a property and a buyer's agent come in and paid $60,000 more than what he was willing to pay for that property. So his point is that buyer's agents, I thought buyer's agents were supposed to get you cheaper property. This buyer's agents paid $60,000 more for their client than what I was going to pay. Why would you use a buyer's agent? You're silly, because it makes it more expensive. And I sat there and I thought about this and I went, there are so many moving parts to this that probably only Tom Panos would be able to articulate for me. My view was, well, just because that buyer was going to buy it for X and someone was going to pay $60,000 more, maybe that is the market price, and that buyers' expectations around price were completely unrealistic, or the vendors thought of what the value of that property was where it was, and therefore his offer was completely unrealistic. Maybe the real estate agent wasn't doing a very good job getting the guy up further to buy the property. Maybe he had more in him. What's your read on this, Tom? Is there relevance in buyer's agents? The buyer's agents overpay. It is Real Estate Exposed. We're supposed to talk about this stuff.
Okay. So there's buyer's agents that watch this show and listen to this show, and there's buyer's agents that are colleagues of mine, and there's buyer's agents that are clients of mine. I've actually got a lot of buyer's agents who are gym members. So it might cost me financially what I'm about to say, but I need everyone to listen to the whole sentence and not half of what I'm about to say. So I do sort of see the point of what you said about the person saying, our buyer's agents overpay. So let's have a look at the model. A buyer's agent essentially gets paid their full amount when they buy a property, right? So I've always thought, as an auctioneer, and I've had people bidding, I love buyer's agents. I love buyer's agents for lots of reasons. One of those is that they're educated, so they're actually not going to, offer something ridiculous that's going to waste everyone's time, which might have happened the case here with your friend and what you're talking about.
Not a friend, just a reader of Smart Property Investment. Don't know them.
Just a reader of Smart Property. So let's have a look at it. This buyer's agent may have actually bought this property at a really good figure, but the reader that you're referring to may have actually expected it to buy it at an unrealistically very low price. That's the first thing. So we're comparing it to the reference point of not what market value is, but to the reference point of this anonymous Smart Property reader, right? That's the first thing. The second thing, which is going back to what I was saying, is the way a buyer's agent gets remunerated is by actually buying a property. So real estate agents and auctioneers always know that they're a good person to work with because they do want to do a deal. Right? Having said that, the other reason I like buyer's agents is that they're pretty educated on values, and they'll, as an auctioneer, they'll normally start at a decent price because they'll know that they're wasting their time if they go too low. But on that issue I think you're going to have two kinds of buyer's agents. I think you're going to get the buyer's agents that do the right thing, that see value and use all the intel that they have and all the capabilities and all the value a buyer's agent brings to secure a property. But hey, there could be instances where the buyer's agent is thinking, man, you know what? My interests are more important than my client's interests. This happens all the time, Phil. It happens in law. It happens in accounting. It happens in IT. It happens in every industry, right? You get a person that is far more interested what's in it for them than what's in it for the client. In fact, if you actually do the research, and I've done the research on Trusted Advisor, if you actually study the research at Yale University, where they've actually done really good research through various projects on how you define a trusted advisor and you separate them from a normal salesperson. A trusted advisor will advise a client even if the advisor themselves does suffer from the advice that they're giving, which essentially says, I'm telling you, you shouldn't buy this property at this price. I'm not going to make money out of it, unfortunately, but it's in your best interest. But I think, Phil, there is buyer's agents out there that probably do the wrong thing. But generally speaking, the buyer's agents that I've come across in New South Wales, they build referral-based businesses, and a referral-based business is based on a client being over the moon and telling their friends and family about how good this buyer agent was. And
I agree with you, Tom. I think we're only at the dawn of buyer's agency here in Australia. I think it's going to become a lot more prevalent moving forward. I don't know what the numbers are. It's a bit of a mystery of how many property transactions actually have the hand of a buyer's agent on it. I've used buyer's agents for the majority of the properties that I've purchased. Good point there from David. The buyer's agent did his job. He bought the house. And what we don't know also, Tom, was this person said it's $60,000 more than he was going to pay. Was that $2,060,000? Like, as a percentage, then it becomes very, very small. Or was it $60,000 on a $250 property? Who knows? There's a lot of what ifs, but I'm a huge advocate, huge proponent of buyer's agents. So I use them. And this same reader was pretty much going, why use a buyer's agent when you can do it yourself? Well, you can do it yourself. And a lot of people do it themselves. And nothing wrong with doing it yourselves. Buy yourself some coin, save some coin.
Buy yourself and save some coin. I get that as well.
Buy yourself and save some coin. That's fine. But it means that you've got to be, you got to have the time, energy, focus to actually do the work properly yourself. And if you've got that, go about doing it. I use a buyer's agency because I'm time poor and I'd rather use experts to do the work for me rather than trying to do it myself. But go and do it yourself as well. That said, you're going to be competing against people that do it for a living, like buyer's agents.
So I think one of the other things that you should take into account is some people find the process of finding property stressful, don't like it. Some people love painting their own home, and they'll paint their own home instead of getting a painter to do it. So I think there's a part of it, Phil, is if you hate the process, right, you probably won't put the time and energy into the process. And if you don't put the time and energy in the process, you'll probably end up making the wrong decision. There's another reason why you should use a buyer's agent. I, on the other hand, not in commercial industrial, which I don't like, but in residential, I actually love the hunt for a property. I find myself a very big user of realestate.com, CoreLogic RP data. I'll find myself driving around in my car looking at stuff from the outside. I actually quite like it. And it's weird because if you picture that I'm walking into 10, 15 houses every Saturday, like, why would you do it? I just love it. So I think that's the other side.
But you should be buying your own stuff, Tom, because I'm sure you could become a buyer's agent if you really wanted to, and you're fully immersed. But you made a really good point now. I think you use the analogy of some people want to paint their own houses. Well, let me tell you, if you've ever painted a house before, the actual painting bit is about 10% of the job. And the same is absolutely the same buying property. 10% of the job is actually negotiating the sale. And the buyer's agent does that bit, and you can do that bit yourself. If you're going to paint, you've got to spend 90% of your time fixing up cracks, removing peeling paint, cleaning it, sugar soaping it, patching it, sanding it, repeat. Then you get the glory of the 10%, which is rolling a wall, right? Cutting in, that takes time. It's an absolute nightmare. Same applies in property investment and buying property. 90% of the work is the groundwork to work out what you're going to buy, and then 10% is the actual negotiation of it. So I don't mind your analogy, Tom.
Have you painted a house yourself?
Yeah.
You like it?
Nah, soul destroying.
Yeah, well, the bit that I remember my dad used to help him paint when we were young. And the bit that I hated is the bit he used to outsource to me, and that was to clean the paintbrushes. And, I hated it. And I remember thinking to myself, I hope he's using water-based paints and not oil-based paints, because with the oil-based paints, it just seemed to be harder. You get paint sticking on things. You get it on your clothes. It's
usually satisfying, right? When you actually sit there and you get a roller out or a spray and you do that bit of the work, that's okay. I can live with that. But it's all the other stuff which takes all the time, energy, and effort that I don't really enjoy it. This guy, Paul Glossop, great analogy, Phil. We must remember that the process of buying a house is far more complicated than simply negotiating the figure. So Paul was, for those of you who don't know, but Paul's been on this chat before, Tom. He was buyer's agent of the year with REB for a couple of years, having trained and understand what could be negotiated on the building and pest inspection through to specific contract conditions, right through to ensuring we have the right insurance coverage along with the depreciation schedule to maximize any tax advantage, and the list goes on. There you go. That's the 90% of the work.
Is that your surfer, mate? Is that your surfer, mate?
Surfer's, if I don't talk about it, I'll get a hard time. I'm actually having dinner with him tonight. Surfer's Guide to Property Investment. That's his book, bestseller, he tells me.
Wow, the Surfer's Guide to Property Investment.
Yeah, so he's big on analogies, right? Like his analogy actually wrote the forward to his book. His analogy, very similar to what we're talking about painting, right? Like he's a surfer. We surf together and do, he does a lot more surfing than I do these days. But his view is that surfing, like 5% of surfing is actually being on a wave, surfing the wave. That the rest of the time is, paddling out there, waiting for the right wave, being in the right position, being fit enough to be able to tackle the wave so you enjoy the wave. What happens when you take the wave? Duck diving, reading the weather, understanding swell directions, understanding when you're going to go surfing rather than just rocking up beach to go surfing. That's pretty much the metaphor he's used as part of his book. It's really quite clever.
Yeah, well, I reckon. I think metaphors are a wonderful way to explain things. People think in pictures, right? They think in pictures. It's a wonderful way to explain things. But Phil, it's funny we're talking about buyer's agent because I had a buyer's agent reach out to me this morning saying to me, in fact, let me see if I can read out the message. It came from, I think he's a gym member. He's okay, Tommy. If you were a buyer's agent in the market we are moving into, what would the main thing you'd be focusing on? Jack Henderson, Henderson Advocacy. And I replied back, have a larger pipeline than ever before because prospective buyers, as the conversion rate, people pulling the trigger is dropping, you're going to need a much higher pipeline of people you're working with. So, and this has come back from me from a few buyers agents, and that is that a lot of these buyers are not pulling the trigger now. So basic sales says if your conversion rate is low, you actually need to be working with a lot more people. So I'm not quite sure whether in this market, Phil, I'm not quite sure whether in this market a buyer's agent is going to find it more challenging because there is more property on the market and vendors are more negotiable. So I'm not quite sure. Buyer's agents actually have improved popularity a little bit. And I think one of these people has mentioned it here, and that's Freddie's mentioned it. $1 Million Listing 2 season has given buyer's agents an idea of a lot of buyers. They think they can get them a bargain. He's going on. But the bottom line is there's a guy by the name of Simon Cohen who's in that show at Lux Listings that is giving people an idea of the buyer's agent side of the equation.
Yeah, look, Simon operates in a particular part of the market. It's more prestige. Whether a lot of he gets a lot of investors using, but he's more normally sort of higher ticket type properties. That's where he focuses, and I think in many ways for promoting buyer's agent, having someone like him on that show is good for the sector. Then you mentioned Jack Henderson is good sort of friend of Smart Property Investment. We've known Jack for years. The first time I ever met Jack, and Jack, if you're tuning into this, I might get this wrong, but he was a young guy. He was like 19 years old, working as a concreter or at some sort of tradie up in Newcastle. That guy was investing in property. He learned the craft, learned the art doing it himself, and then said, "Hang on a second, I quite like real estate." And this buyer's agency now he's built up his buyer's agents practice. Henderson, I think it's Henderson Advisory. And the fact that he's texting you, asking you what's going on, I find that quite interesting. But to your point, Tom, whether buyer's agents struggle in this market, my particular view, and this is Real Estate Exposed, is that I think the relevance of buyer's agents is only going to become even more pointy in this downwards market because prior to this market downturn, if that's what you want to call it, it was not about trying to find and negotiate undervalued market properties because they really didn't exist. They were moving like hotcakes. Buyers agents are finding properties before typically they end up on realestate.com.au. They call it off-market or pre-market type properties. We've debated that before, but they're finding properties typically other people never get a shot at. That's a huge advantage, and you're going to see that happening a lot more, I think, in this market moving forward as prices come off. But more so, the best buyers agents I know, and I'm sort of seeing at the moment, they're changing a lot of their abilities around identifying properties that you can actually manufacture equity out of, and whether that's increasing rents or cosmetic renovations for increasing capital value. You're seeing a lot of that happening right now. So I think the balance of power is probably going to go back into the hands of buyers agents. Buyers agents I speak to, Tom, are getting a lot more phone calls from real estate agents. 6 months ago, the real estate agents didn't want to know them. So that's the transition you're seeing right now. But we can talk about that at length, Tom. We've gone on probably a bit too long. This is supposed to be an express edition of Real Estate Exposed. That's Tom Panos. I'm Phil Tarrant. I hope you enjoyed it.
Guys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you and talk to you next week. Have a good week.